everyone, and welcome back to What Moves You with Jessie. Today, I have a guest that I am so stoked to share with you. I have the daughter of a dear colleague of mine who now is going to become a colleague of mine as well. I have Ashana Ross on the podcast today, who I have just only recently met, which is really unfortunate for me because she is an absolute delight and full of depth and wisdom and grounding. She is the daughter of Rohini and Angus Ross, who are also coaches in this understanding, who I love and adore so much and have worked with, I worked alongside. But yes, Ashana is their very adult daughter who I have just recently had the opportunity to meet. And we got into conversation because she was kind of interested. We were connected actually by another colleague in our field. But she was interested in just talking to me about my business and kind of learning the ropes of my own story of how I got to where I am now in running my business. But in that conversation, of course, I asked her who she was really inspired to work with. And when that is what kind of started this wonderful opening of her sharing with me her experience of having the diagnosis of autism and being on this journey of understanding how her mind works and how even if it might feel different to others, she has learned in such a way that she feels grounded in herself. And she was so inspiring to listen to. And I know a few people in my own life who have received the diagnosis of autism. And it feels like it kind of knocks them into a different category to where understanding how their mind works might not still apply. And so for me to have this conversation with Ashana where she was really showing me and proving to me what I kind of knew at some level, but it was really wonderful to hear from her own experience. The fact that that's not true and that you can find grounding and safety and security within yourself, no matter where you are inside. So let me bring her on. And here she is. What a surprise. Dr. Ross, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Jessie. It's so great to be here. I'm so excited to continue this conversation that we were having. And thank you so much. The introduction was so sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Absolutely. So right off the bat, why don't you share with us today? How are you today? The basics. How are you today?
Totally. I'm doing really good today. This week has been an interesting week. I think I'm in Olympia, Washington, so it's like the end of winter where you really want it to be spring and it's still winter and rainy. I'm feeling that. But despite all of that, I have been on this journey and discovering myself. I feel like even recently it's just gotten so much more beautiful and powerful within myself. And every day I'm finding the groundedness even more. So that's a lot of what these past few weeks have been.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. I'm so happy for you because it feels so good, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So let's kind of start at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I have already taken a moment to touch base with you to see what you were willing to share. And you said you are a very open book. Mm-hmm. So if anything comes to mind that might be kind of hard for someone to hear, I will definitely put a little tag at the beginning of the show to make sure that they know that. But I think it's important for us to share with everyone listening that no matter what you share, even if you don't share really hard parts, whatever occurs to you, no matter what you share, I know that you are coming from such a loving place and that you sharing your journey is actually extremely comforting for others, and makes them feel seen and a sense of belonging. And if they have any feelings of being othered in their life, that I love that this is an opportunity for them to not feel that way anymore.
Mhm.
So no holds bar.
Yeah. Great.
Not to make you be like, okay, let me look for all
Yeah.
the drama in my life. Not at all. Only share what makes sense for the moment.
Mhm.
But I would love for you to kind of start with, if you don't mind, what was it like for you growing up before you kind of understood yourself in this way?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important to talk about those moments because where I am now is very different than like when I was growing up, especially in my teenage years and even early adulthood. Like I was really struggling for a long time and I definitely felt like an othered person. It felt like everyone had this like secret figured out and no one was telling me the secret of life and I was like struggling and like scrambling to figure it out. And so I really felt isolated for a very long time. And before I was diagnosed with autism when I was 19. And before I was diagnosed with autism, there was always this like inkling inside of like something was different that I like was seeing in myself and not in other people. And so there was a while of like talking with my parents when I first learned about autism. I was like, I think I have that. And they were like, no, you don't have that. There's also like, there's not a lot of research on autism and there still isn't a lot of research, particularly for female people with autism. There's not much research on that or people of color as well. It's still something that people are trying to figure out within themselves and then also in this like larger field too. So a lot of my traits didn't fit the like stereotypical boy traits of autism because I am a very high masking autistic person. So I was struggling a lot as a kid, but I learned at a young age to hide that struggle. So outwardly, everyone thought I was just this like shy, sweet girl that like didn't talk sometimes. Um, but in that, I was really struggling socially. I was struggling in my school. I was struggling in my home life with my family. I had panic attacks for a really long time, or what I thought were panic attacks, that are actually autistic meltdowns. And so autistic meltdowns can happen a lot from like overwhelm of overstimulation. And what I thought were 3 hour long panic attacks were actually overstimulation and overwhelming autistic meltdowns. And so those moments were a lot of like hyperventilation, but also just like being so stuck in this cycle mentally and physically as well. It's a pretty somatic feeling. It's not just thoughts either, which was a lot scarier to figure out as well, because it's not so much getting out of my thinking. It's also like I wanted to get out of my body too. And my family didn't understand what that was either. It wasn't until I got diagnosed that like we have kind of learned together what it looks like and also like how neurodivergence shows up in my family too. Because unmasking is something that everyone can do. It's not just for autistic people, it's for everyone in their daily lives of just being authentic to themselves. And I think we live in a world that really ran on repression for a long time, and masking yourself and masking the traits of yourself that were deemed socially unacceptable. And now we're kind of moving into this era where people really want to just like let their freak shine. And I think that's great. I want to be a part of that.
Can you give us to you what masking means?
Yeah. So masking is kind of like trying to present yourself as socially acceptable to like whatever surrounding that you're in. And so like it can be even as small as like when you go into work, you kind of put up a mask of like professionalism. And then for autistic people, a lot of it is kind of like a safety mechanism, is we don't want to be singled out or like known as different. So we try and put it in this mask of like normality to show to other people that like we can present as neurotypical, so we're not targeted or singled out. And I feel really privileged to be a white person with autism because there's a lot of intersections of people of color and autism where they are more likely to be targeted if they're not masking, and they don't have the privilege sometimes to unmask because of the violence that's enacted against them. And so I do have this privilege to be able to unmask when I want to unmask. There is the fear around it where, like, I know as a kid, I was judged and like bullied by my friends. And so like there was a reason why I started masking. It wasn't because I just like decided one day that I wanted to like do that, I was being singled out and targeted, and like my traits were seen as mainly like rude, as being a woman too, is like women are meant to be very like put together and nice. And so I felt like I had really internalized a lot of those beliefs. And because I was a really loud kid, I was pretty disruptive. And so I really had to like hide those parts of myself. And then it turned into this very quiet, not talking, like shy, socially anxious. And a lot of it too was like to hide my emotions as well. Like I felt like I was a very emotional child, very sensitive. And I think I can attribute that to my autism as well, as I think, and I think that's a good thing to be sensitive to. I don't see that as a bad thing, but I feel like I'm very sensitive to like my surroundings and just emotional. And so as a kid, that was really overwhelming and difficult to navigate. So it was a lot of like shutting down my emotions and not feeling them. And now it's this journey of like, how do I feel my emotions without going into that space again? And also like healthily like express them.
Beautifully said. I love how you said, how do I, what I'm hearing in you is how do I be myself, not get into the habit of masking, and then also healthily process. I love that. Because there's so much care in that, and there's so much self-awareness in that, right? Because I think Matt, thank you so much for sharing your definition of masking, because you nailed it. Not that I had one, but that sounds exactly right to me. And such a common, I mean, even people listening to this who might not find that they are neurodivergent, or as the TikTokers say, neurospicy,
Yeah.
right? Even if people don't find themselves in that place, the idea of masking and what you're sharing in that is so powerful too, because, that comes from all the conditioning we absorb. I think what can feel scary for people, and this is what I want you to speak to, I think what can feel scary to people is the idea that, okay, if I unmask and I'm truly myself, then what does that look like when I'm in circumstances or environments where maybe it doesn't make sense to fully feel whatever that, or whatever it is that's occurred, like that they've got going on in their mind right now about this. Can you speak to that, like what that's looked like for you?
Definitely. Yes. Because when I was diagnosed, I like my whole world around me kind of crumbled of like perceptions of who I was and what was happening around me, because I kind of realized at that point that everything that I was and identified with was to be perceived well by everyone around me. So I was who I thought everyone wanted me to be, and I wasn't myself. And so it was this really scary realization that I just had no like self identity, no, like I had no idea who I was or who I wanted to be. And that felt really scary. And then it felt really exciting, because then it meant I got to learn who I was. And then I went on this whole process of trying to figure out who I was and what my likes were and what my dislikes were. And so it was like a long and like it's still happening now. Like it doesn't end. And so there's this thing too, where you realize, okay, who am I? Where does my mask begin and where does my mask end? Because a lot of it becomes blurred and becomes a part of your personality. Because even if people aren't masking in an unhealthy way that's draining them, everyone's just masking in their lives, because there is certain situations that require different levels of yourself. And so the way I've seen it is kind of like a dimming light switch, is like I can turn up my personality or turn it down if I want to, but all of it's still me. So I'm not necessarily masking. It's just like, okay, this situation, I want to like present this side of myself, or I'm going to turn this part up. I guess maybe it's not a light switch. I guess it's like one of those soundboards or something that you're moving up and down, because there's multiple different ones.
Well, you said dimmer. I like the dimmer.
Yeah. So it's like trying to figure out like when I'm masking in a way that's draining my energy and is making me feel because I notice when I mask, like after it, I like can't do anything for the rest of the day. I'm so burnt out. It took so much of my energy to try and like put up this facade of who I am that like, and it could like burn me out for like weeks too. Like it's not just like a one day like reset. And so like it was first starting to figure out like when I was masking because I didn't even knew when I was masking because like every part of me was a mask almost. And so it was kind of bringing awareness to when I was like feeling burnout, when my energy was down, and when I recognized when I was masking. And then it moved into, okay, I'm going to like try and figure out who I am and keep that personality intact and then dim it when needed. And so that's kind of where I feel like I'm at now, as I feel like I present myself in different situations, but it's all still me. Like I still feel like all of it's a part of me. And there's just different parts of myself that I like to present. And I think I can have fun with that. It doesn't feel like it's draining my energy now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like you're really just feeling into the moment.
Yes.
Feeling
Yeah.
into where, you know, which we all kind of do naturally
Mhm.
when we're not aware of it,
Mhm.
it's like you can be hanging out at a party and you can kind of sense when somebody walks in the room, like, oh, they seem like they're kind of in a bad mood, or,
Mhm.
oh, I wonder if they're okay and I should go say hi, or, you can kind of feel into a conversation and know it's not really going right. So maybe I need to ask more questions or have them repeat something. So
Mhm.
we all do that so naturally. And it sounds to me like you've just gotten really tight with that to really listen to yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've made it a priority to really listen to myself and like learn and build this relationship with my body because that was something that was so difficult for so long as I had a really negative relationship with my body. And so now it was this shift into I really want to love and honor myself and my body. And what does that look like now? And I think a lot of it too is advocating for my needs as well because I don't push myself like I used to. There will be days that I do, but if I don't want to be social, I will let myself not be social. And sometimes I just need to not be around anyone. And I know I need those times. And so I like put a lot more priority towards myself and honoring those needs. And also, like, even last night, me and my boyfriend went out for dinner and we were at a table. I was already really overstimulated from the day, and we got to this table, and the only table that we sat at had this really bright light bulb in the light that was hanging over the table. And it was the only table that had that, and I could not do it. And in that, like, I'm so lucky to have a partner that really advocates for me too, because he was like, we'll move. You don't have to sit here if you're like already overstimulated, because I was really feeling it yesterday. And so we were able to move. And it's like those little acts of like just letting myself allowed to feel comfortable. Like I deserve to be comfortable. And I think that's an internalized belief, especially for people with autism, is they don't deserve to feel comfortable in these spaces. Because the world is really built for neurotypical and non-disabled people. And so a lot of those spaces exclude disabled people. And that's a lot of what I'm learning in my class too, is like how the systems put in place really exclude people and how it internalizes this belief that we aren't undeserving. And so it starts with having to dismantle that within ourselves. But then there's also this greater thing that these are still issues in our world today, is that what I'm recognizing, and the more I'm like empowering myself in my autism, the more I'm realizing that like the world around me, I don't want to participate in sometimes because it's just not the world that I want to see. It's a world that's built on like for non-disabled people or just for this one specific type of group of people and excludes everyone else. Like I want to be in a more inclusive world.
Mic drop. So beautiful. And Ashana, I have to say, although it's very important that we stay on track, that this is such a beautiful exploration around your relationship with autism and for people to hear that. The stuff you are saying is also incredibly relatable and needed to be heard by everybody.
Yes, yeah.
Truly, because it is amazing how much we get caught up into made up ideas of who we need to be and how we need to function. And then like you said, then that leads to us masking and stuffing ourselves and stuffing our needs, not listening to ourselves. And managing scenarios and situations and conversations and relationships and things that don't feel right when we can very easily, very naturally, just like you saying last night, let's move to a different table.
Mhm.
That didn't blow the earth up.
No, it didn't.
And that's what most of our ordinary life looks like. But it's amazing how we stuff even the most ordinary things and it
Yeah.
adds up.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the adding up is like such a potent thing because we don't realize that it's adding up. We just take the small things because it's like that learned conditioning that we're meant to do that. And then it gets to this like boiling over point. I think that's what I really experienced in like my teenage years is like I was letting it get to that boiling point and I would just explode and not be able to handle any of it. And I think all of us like with the unmasking is for everyone, like it is for everyone. All of this that I'm saying is not just for autistic or disabled people. It is for everyone. Everyone deserves accessibility. Everyone deserves to be themselves authentically and unmask. And yeah, yeah.
So true. God, I've got chills. Always a good sign. So what was your boiling point? What happened in your life where you or the family or whomever, all of you guys, or just you by yourself and you presented it, however this, because I don't know. What was the point where you went, something else has to be at play here?
Mhm.
And it made you curious. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it was just like a lot of small experiences that it was just in my everyday life that I was noticing. And I think it was every day I felt incredibly alone and isolated, even when I had groups of friends or was with people. It just always felt like something was like not right and that there was something like broken within myself. And I just felt like I wasn't able to do what everyone else was doing. And I didn't understand why I was more sensitive to things and would like cry more or like get angry and like have these like meltdowns, and then like people just like understood social cues and I just wasn't getting it a lot of the time. And I think a lot of it was like throughout high school I really like had this bad relationship with myself and I like had no disregard for myself, and so it was a lot of like putting myself in situations that were also not good for me because I just didn't care about myself. I feel like I gave up at that point. And so throughout this time, I like knew that something was different, but I felt like nothing could change. Like this was just like how I was meant to be, that I was broken or I was weird. And there was no way for me to change or get better. Like I felt like I just gave up basically. And so throughout high school, I was suicidal for most of it. And just like because of the lack of social cues too, like we're in situations with people that like weren't great because I also just didn't understand what was happening in my surroundings to a certain extent too. And like with autism, it's a lot of slow processing. And so things can happen and you don't know what's happening or how it's making you feel. And so like it takes a long time. And so I don't think it was until like after high school that I processed everything and I like had this step back moment. And it was after high school that I feel like I was able to have more conversations with my parents of like, I think I do have autism. And I think they were starting to see that, oh, maybe you do have autism, you need to get tested for this. And that was a lot in like the panic attacks that I was having. Is my mom had this realization. She's like, I don't think these are regular panic attacks. I was like, I really don't think so either. But it took a long time, I feel like, to advocate for myself and to be listened, even in my family, just because of like the lack of education in autism in general. Like they just didn't know. And I don't like blame them for not knowing. It's like no one really knew. But I also feel really fortunate that at some point they did listen and they said, okay, like we're going to get you a diagnosis. And like, I know there's so many people out there who aren't even like able to get a diagnosis. It is so hard specifically to get an autism diagnosis. Sometimes it's like a 2-year long wait list or longer. And sometimes you go and the doctor doesn't even listen to you. Especially if you're like not white or not a non-man, like they don't listen to you. But like I feel like I had a very fortunate experience in that like I was able to get a diagnosis. And then it was this like For me, I feel like getting the diagnosis, I was kind of like, yeah, I knew this. And then I feel like it was for everyone around me to be like, oh, okay, like this is something that you do experience. And it validated my experience because everyone was able to see it. And then in getting that diagnosis, I still felt like I was broken or weird because I was like, well, now I have autism. I just have this thing to label it. Like it doesn't change anything. And then after that, it was this journey into not viewing my autism as a disorder. And today I don't view it as a disorder. I view it as like this empowered identity that I have in myself that I like love to talk about with people and share. And it's because I don't feel broken. I just know that I don't fit into neurotypical standards or the standards that are like in our everyday lives. Like, and I don't want to fit into them anymore. I want to be autistic and like move in the way that I want to move in. And so my autism isn't a disorder. It disables me in the way that I can't function like neurotypical people, and that's okay.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely want to launch in the direct. I have an idea of a direction, but I feel like I need to cover a little bit more track before I go there. So so just, I guess that I needed to just share where my own journey of.
Yes.
So, okay. I am going to ask you about kind of how you don't end up just living your life up to the diagnosis versus being able to have a fuller life even beyond that, right? That is coming.
Mm-hmm.
First, though, and I know that this can be different for many different people. You and I we are both not claiming to be doctors here.
Yes.
our own, precautions. But anyway, can you share what your personal, like, I know you did say that, you had the feelings of what felt kind of like a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
But can you kind of give a little bit of insight into your inner world that feels like to you?
Yeah. I feel like ever since I was a kid, I was very internal person. My parents used to say I was in Ashana land a lot of the time. I was like completely checked out from everything. And like one of the things that were in my diagnostic criteria is when I was, I think, 6 years old, like I had no interest in playing with the other kids. And I was like, just wasn't trying to make friends. And my teachers were really worried about me, but I was having a blast. Like I remember that time and I was having so much fun. And so like I just do like well in my internal head. And I feel like I was always in my head as a kid and like very creative and imaginative. And I didn't really have this like wanting to be a part of like what everyone else was doing. I felt like content in my own brain. And so I feel like it's hard for me to explain like my lack of social cues sometimes, or like not being able to understand them, because I feel like in my masking, I've worked so hard to try and understand social cues that like and understand patterns that are happening, but I'm still not like, there's like, it just feels like there's like a blockage that's happening, or just sometimes like there's a lot of miscommunication that's happening in my daily life, or like I feel like I'm explaining myself wrong, or I'm saying things and people are like, why would you say that? Or like, I don't know if my tone's coming off in a different way. If I'm not, it's mainly like when I'm not paying attention to who I am, or like I'm unmasked, I like can just be kind of abrupt, or just like my tone's off and I don't know that it's off because I'm not watching myself. I'm just kind of existing. And then I also like, there's the processing part with autism. And so there's like the slow processing that I talked about, where like it can take a while to understand how you feel, because I don't know how I feel in the moment a lot of the time. And so it's a lot of like having to check in with myself. And then there's also like the sensory processing, where there's top down and bottom up processing. And I don't remember which one is which. I know one is like neurotypical people process one way and neurodivergent people process another way. But what it really is I am receiving every sensory input at once. So like if there's noises or lights, like a lot of neurotypical people, like that's background noise to them and they can focus on what's happening. To me, it's just all happening at once. And I like everything can be singled out. And so like if I'm at a restaurant with my family and it's busy, like I can't focus on the conversation because I'm like hearing every like conversation that's around me. All the lights are going. Like it's just I can't like compartmentalize what's going on. It's just all like an overwhelm that's kind of like thrown in my face.
Right. This is that's so good. You know, you had mentioned that, you know, like yesterday you were feeling pretty fried already, pretty,
Mhm.
and then, you know, you were conscientious of the light and everything. So before you understood yourself, would you find that you would get knocked out and exhausted for days on end and have no idea why?
Yeah, definitely. And it really impacted my school and just like work life too. And I really like struggled with depression throughout like all my teenagers. And then I think a lot of it was also autistic burnout and I just like didn't know. But there was like, I think 1 full year where I was in burnout. Like sometimes they can last a really long time. And it was because I was just like overexerting myself so much and I just like didn't realize that anything was getting to me. And so sometimes it can last like just 20 minutes of just like needing to recharge. And then sometimes it's like a whole year. Like it really depends on like how much I'm overexerting myself. But I think like, especially in high school, I was just doing so much all the time. And then there would be like days where I like could not do anything. I couldn't function. And that was a lot of like just feeling depressed and suicidal because I was like, I can't do any of it. Yeah.
So did that feel like brain fog? Did it feel like just lack of energy? Did it feel like you couldn't open your eyes? You were so exhausted. Can you give some kind
Yeah.
of, yeah.
It's definitely like brain fog and like just it feels like I just am not able to process what is like happening. Like I don't even know how I feel. And it's like, I guess a numb feeling and a lot of brain fog and just like exhaustion of like, I can't like, it really shows up in like when I need to socialize, I just feel like I can't do it. And I stop being able to like process and like socialize because I'll be in so if I'm burnt out in a social conversation, like I just won't talk because there's just nothing for me to say because I'm just thinking how exhausted I am. Like I can't like it feels like I just can't function, I guess. But it definitely I feel like would show up in brain fog a lot.
Yes. And that, you know, for anybody listening who doesn't suppose that they're neurodivergent and they're more neurotypical, I think it'd be kind of neat for them to get reflective and get to, you know, kind of remember what it feels like when they are deeply exhausted and don't feel like they can function and have no
Mhm.
energy. Maybe it's after the holidays or if they have kids and it's just been a
Mhm.
really hard week or whatever this is. Um, or at the end of exams for any students listening and they're just super fried. And that is the state that you quickly jump into if you're not conscientious of your energy levels.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Something that takes a lot of big compiling events for a neurotypical person is something that is quite quick to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I can never like anticipate what it is that could trigger that or like when I'm like already depleted of energy. Like it could be a very small, just like an hour long interaction, or it's like could be more than that. And I think that's like also what contributed to my meltdowns as well too, is like that just complete burnout and exhaustion and like overwhelm because a lot of that when I was in burnout, like I still had to like participate in school or work and socializing. So it's like I had to still be a functioning member of society while I did not feel like a functioning member of society. Yeah.
So you're in school now, you're
Yeah,
at
I am.
university. So how do you, you know, how does it feel different this go around versus high school when you didn't understand yourself? Do you
Mhm.
find that you've got a little bit more ebb and flow that you're flowing with so you don't go into a year's long worth of burnout? Like talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think I'm having a very different experience with school than I did. I tested out of high school and I dropped out and tested out of high school when I was 16 because I just could not do high school anymore. And then so I was out of school for like 5 years or so. I went back to university when I was 21. And I am doing really well at my university, and I was doing really poorly at school before then. And a lot of it is feeling like the confidence within myself, because I had like since my well-being just felt like so down, and like I felt so incapable of being able to take care of myself. And in this journey of like self-acceptance, I've learned like how to take care of myself. I don't think I knew how to take care of myself before, and so now that I know the things that I need to like help me throughout the day. And so a lot of that shows up in routines. Like I have a 2 hour morning long routine that I do every morning to start my day. And so I'll wake up a little earlier than I need to, but I know that's like how I'm gonna like prepare myself for the day almost. And it's a lot of like letting myself move slowly so I'm not being rushed, I think is really important for me, because then I start to feel really stressed if I just start my day on like go, go, go. Because at school right now, I am doing a lot of things between like school and volunteering and work. Like my schedule is pretty busy during the week. And there are times where I feel like it starts to like stack up too much and I start to get to that boiling point. But I think I have a lot more awareness within myself and knowing when I'm reaching those points where I don't let it boil over. I don't have my 3 hour long meltdowns that I used to have. They will sometimes happen, but they're a lot shorter. And it's mainly because I don't like, I can watch myself and see when I'm getting to that point and then kind of like simmer down before then. And it's a lot of like not judging myself too, in that, because it's self acceptance. It's not like throwing toxic positivity at myself, like, I'm doing great. It's like, I know when I'm not doing great, and I just have the acceptance of myself in it. And I know that judging myself or resisting it is what's going to cause more suffering within myself.
Yes.
Mhm.
That's what was occurring to me with the year-long, burnout that you felt, or those long panic attacks, or what felt like panic attacks. What did you call them? I'm sorry.
Autistic meltdowns.
Autistic meltdowns. Okay. Um, what was kind of occurring to me when you shared that was I thought, well, I can only imagine, because I used to live in an anxious body. And
Mhm.
so how I can relate to you is that when I used to feel anxiety, when I didn't understand what it was, I would add so much more thinking in. Like
Mhm.
I would add so much more thinking of what's wrong with me. I was scared of what was happening, so I'd get scared. I'd start thinking about my life more, about what's going on in my life that's making me feel this way. What do I need to change? How am I still here? Why is this a problem? So there's just so much more noise. So does that feel relatable, that because you understand your inner world more, you can just be in the flow of what's happening and take care of yourself, and that all that extra stuff has kind of fallen
Mhm.
away?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like I've learned a lot about my thinking and how when I'm stuck in my thinking, it causes a lot more like pain in my, or like suffering within myself. And so that has been really helpful to not identify with my thoughts, because when I was identifying with my thoughts, I felt like just this horrible person and just not capable. And so like I know when I get those like the anxiety, like that gets a lot louder, and I can just say I accept you to my thoughts and let them be, and say, okay, I feel anxious right now, and recognize that within myself, and not necessarily try and change it, but just like bringing the awareness to it brings almost acceptance to it as well.
Well, because what I'm hearing is underpinning it is that you're not afraid of it because you know you're okay.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yeah, because that was a big thing in this journey towards discovering myself, is I promised myself that I would have a safe space within my body to always fall back into, and that internally like I will like be able to hold and comfort myself, that I don't need to like escape from myself anymore, that I can like go within and hold space for me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What do you call that space, Ashana?
I haven't named it yet. I guess it's like, I view it as almost like a net that's kind of catching me. I guess it's like a very visual place for me, I guess.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Wow, I love that. I have I've had one client say that it feels like a big comfy chair.
That's great.
No, and at one point it's lost it's funny because I when I first had that same kind of realization of, oh, there's a space inside that's underneath the noise and the feeling and the experience
Mhm.
that is sturdy.
Mhm.
And so when I kind of first started to see that, I pictured it, and a dear friend of mine, he still quotes me because he loves it and he still hangs on to it. But you know, to me it felt like, okay, fall back into the river. Like I was picturing myself at the end
Mhm.
of a pier and just fall back into the lazy river, back into the lazy river. And that was something that was kind of helpful for me to remember. Now,
Mhm.
you know, as we go down the path of life,
Mhm.
in that understanding, because we'll go deeper for the rest of our lives. But now it's almost kind of just natural where I can feel when I'm getting caught up or I'm going, my body lets me know where I'm going in my head. And I just go bunk and I like pop back.
Yeah.
But it's just an interesting kind of journey that we all have of
Yeah.
starting to kind of get a sense of what that is inside.
Mhm.
So, okay, God, this is so great. Um, Thank you again for
Of
coming.
course. Of course. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your perspective on, because this was the thing that made me go, my wisdom went after
Mhm.
about the podcast. Because I asked you this question and I loved what you said. Can't remember what you said. But so something that I saw in myself just as living in an anxious body for a long time is identified with that, right? And so then I almost lived my life up to that self-diagnosis, if you want to call
Yes.
it
Yeah.
that. And so what that would look like is that I would a lot of times make my life smaller,
Mhm.
right? Especially professionally, because I really related my anxiety to all the things I was up to in my career.
Mhm.
So mind screw because the career I was in was the thing that I dreamt about my whole life. So it
Mhm.
was one of those mind screws about like, how is it that the thing I love the most is giving me so much suffering?
Mhm.
Luckily it wasn't, I figured out. But anyway,
Mhm.
so when it came to that, that meant I didn't go to certain places. I wouldn't go to take class from certain teachers because I had previously deemed them the reason for my anxiety.
Mhm.
So I hear that often, and so many, people who receive diagnosis of all different types, where it's like it's exactly like you said just a few minutes ago, where you receive it, and there's like a moment of relief, and then after, in the following hours or days, you
Mhm.
start to kind of go, well, okay then, but now that just means I have it, and this is it.
Mhm.
And people can stay there and again keep just living their life up to that. So
Yeah.
so tell us what that has looked like for you to have that moment of okay,
Mhm.
and then but then go, I don't actually want that to limit me though.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Because it was when I got the diagnosis, it was this relief of like I had been trying to like advocate for myself for so long and I finally like I got it. I achieved this. And then it was just like, oh no, like now I like know that something's wrong with me. Like I can prove that something's wrong with me. And I was definitely like someone who loved to label myself in any way because of that lack of self-identity and really wanting to like resonate with other things, but that made me feel like, oh, like I need to prove why I'm bad. I need to prove why I'm wrong or why I can't do the things that I want to do and why I'm different than everyone else. Um, and it took a lot of like, I think unlearning and getting out of the conditioning within that, and then also seeing that like autism is not a bad thing. And I think for so long it's been viewed as something that's bad and wrong, and has been viewed as like we need to label this for the people that can't do things. They're different than us and we need to label them. And so I feel like that has been what autism was for so long. And the way that I see it within myself is I see a lot of like the ways that I enjoy how it shows up in myself. And I wouldn't want it to be any other way. I think there's a lot of things about my autism that I really like, and that I'm very sensitive. And I think it makes me a very curious person too. Like, I think it helps me in my academics and my passions with that and why I'm in school. And like, there's a lot of hyperfixations that I love and like enjoy. And so it was really like understanding that autism itself isn't a disorder. It's just something that like non-disabled people, neurotypical people wanted to kind of like box in on people. And I still feel like an able person. I just don't fit into like the conformity of the way like our systems have been built on. And I don't want to either So I do feel really empowered in my identity with autism, and I'm also queer too. And I feel like there's a lot of intersections with queerness and neurodiversity that I also love. And I feel like I hold my autism identity to the same ways I hold my queer identity. Is I think it's something to be really proud of within myself. And it's just like a part of who I am. And it doesn't mean that I'm not doing good or that I'm suffering. It just means that like it's just a part of me. It's just a different facet of who I am. And there's ways in which I suffered, but I wasn't suffering because I was autistic. It was more of just the conformity that I feel like the deconditioning that everyone needs to get out of understanding that we are deserving of accessibility and being authentic.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It is just amazing to me how we have, ultimately everything we're talking about here is the beginning of the trickle-down effect as to why people think there's something wrong with them in any avenue. And ultimately, it's like, it popped up in my head at the end of what you were saying, where I thought, there was a time that there weren't even any products for people who are left-handed.
Yeah.
Like, who made up, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I remember when my niece, who's now 30, when it started to become obvious that she was left-handed, I remember that somebody had even asked my sister, oh, does that really bother you? Are you going to try to train her to be right-handed? I remember thinking, what? Why?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was in the middle of the 90s.
Yes. Yeah.
And you just kind of start to realize, like, our culture, our society has been absolutely created based on just some made-up idea of what's typical, and then we all use that as the measuring stick.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
How does that make sense?
It's absurd.
Yeah.
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 I mean, it's a lot of what I'm like focusing my studies on in school, and how like our systems are really integrated in colonial practices and like the capitalism, and how everything is kind of geared towards like labor and productivity in our world. And anyone who doesn't fit into those boxes of what good labor looks like we're kind of ostracized for being different. And we're like embracing our differences as part of that resistance to that.
Whoa. You just made my mind blow, because I have had a lot of, in my own process of getting to know my own inner world and who I am and how I function at my best. Man, I've had my private practice for 7.5 years now, but those first couple of years, I had so much habitual thinking about not doing enough. And running my own business. And if I had the inclination to go on a walk on a Tuesday at 11 a.m., there was a band of noise in my head screaming at me that everybody else was working. And what are you doing?
Yeah.
You can't think of anything to do with your business right now. Just go sit your ass in front of the computer and make yourself feel like you're doing something.
Yeah.
So by you saying that your studies are really showing you that part of our cultural conditioning, which seems so obvious to me that you said it, but thank you for saying it because it wasn't obvious to me until you said it.
Yeah.
Part of it has been so geared towards being labor oriented.
Yeah. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. 'Cause it is something that I feel like is just kind of in the background of our minds, is like we're all part of this system and we are all working towards like good labor practices basically. And it's hard to, when you put it in focus of realizing like how do we not conform to the system that we're under, and that's like definitely a bigger thing, but it does start in like within ourselves. And there's the rest as revolution movement, where resting is like such a great resistance practice, as we deserve to rest and we deserve to be able to go home to ourselves. We don't need to be good enough to offer to society. We are already good enough.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh my God, say it again. Louder for the people in the back. Because that's been a big one for me too.
Yeah.
Something, for whatever reason, my husband has always been very okay with knowing that he needs a lot of rest.
Mhm.
And frankly, we've been together for almost 22 years. Frankly, for more than half. I mean, I'm going to be real honest, which is
Mhm.
embarrassing. Probably only until about 4 or 5 years ago,
Mhm.
I would kind of hold on to it inside myself because I wouldn't want to be like an asshole wife
Mhm.
and make him feel like he couldn't be himself.
Mhm.
But at least 3 or 4 times a year, it would come out with some resentment where I'd finally kind of go and like,
Yeah.
because I honestly thought, I was like, you're lazy.
Mhm.
And he's not. He has always been a magnificent creative, worked his ass off to make money, be an equal part of our relationship. Like I always said, my relationship. But, it's like all of that. I couldn't even see that sometimes because the fact that he would allow himself to deeply rest
Mhm.
and listen to his own time. Like he gets more creative and more energy late at night.
Mhm.
Honored it. And he would let himself sleep a little bit more in the morning. And
Mhm.
and sleeping more, by the way, because he went to bed late. So he still
Yeah.
needs the eight
Yeah.
hours or
Yeah.
9 hours, but on a different timeline than
Mhm.
we're all trained is the right one.
Mhm.
God. And then once I finally realized, like, why don't you just accept him for who he is? All of that thinking fell away. And
Yeah.
I mean, of course, he's flourishing even more than ever. And same with
Mhm.
me because he can just be himself.
Yeah.
Is this resonating with your own
Yes.
experience of
Yeah,
yourself?
definitely. Yeah. I mean, it was just making me think. I feel like I had like an aha moment in myself recently that like I am still trying to make myself fit into the way that the world works in these systems, even with like I set like so many reminders on my phone. I am such a forgetful person. And like, because I feel so sporadic in my head, and like, I'm still, it like even goes to like little things of just like trying to fit into like time and like the way in which I need to like be doing things and being productive. Like, I have that instilled productivity internalized, like feelings in myself that I still need to be doing good and I still need to be offering something good and being productive and like goal oriented. And a lot of like what I do, like I keep myself on rigid schedules because of that. And that's my own anxiety too. And I don't know what that would look like if that would fall away, because I haven't really like, I've done a lot of internal work, and then it would be a much longer journey of like, okay, how does this like change the way I'm going to approach work too? Because I feel like work is such this own system within itself.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
I mean, ultimately, you're speaking to the journey forward, everything
Yes.
exploring and finding, right?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
that's the exciting part of everything.
Mhm.
Um, oh man, okay. I'm conscious of time and I'm like, oh, I wish we had 10 hours. Okay. Okay. Hold on. I know where I was going, and then you just said something that made me want to go a different direction. But I think I want to stick to where I was going. Okay, here I go. Um, you mentioned a couple of times that when you were not, you didn't have clarity around this.
Mm-hmm.
The family didn't have clarity around this, that you
Mm-hmm.
felt very broken.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in your recalling all of that, all I kept kind of hearing in you was 100% your well-being that
Mm-hmm.
knew something was off,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because that is, and I feel like it's important for me to point out for everybody listening, because I'm sure so many people can relate to the feeling of, I feel broken, I feel like something's
Mm-hmm.
wrong, something's off here. But when I hear that, I hear that is the healthy, true
Mm-hmm.
self you going, something is off here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something is off here. Can
Mm-hmm.
you speak to that healthy part of you that you see now is consistent and unconditional and
Yeah.
universal for every human being, no matter their
Yeah.
neurotypical neurodivergence or anything that they're up against
Mhm.
in their life?
Yeah, yeah. Because I think that like feeling like I was broken is I was really seeing that I was like really struggling in my life and in myself to like love myself and do the things that I also love and enjoy in my life. Like I was just really struggling. And so like a part of me did feel broken, but that recognizing that something was broken was really recognizing that I was just struggling and I didn't want to struggle in the ways that I was struggling. I wanted to feel at peace within myself. And so that really was the start of that journey of like wanting to find that safety net within myself and feeling at peace within myself is like, I want to honor my needs and no longer repress the parts of myself that if I'm struggling, it means that like there's something else that I need to offer to myself in those moments of like, I'm going to offer myself like an arm of compassion in that time when I'm struggling. It's okay to struggle, but I can also be there for myself within that. And outside of that, I can also ask for support too. That was a big thing is I did not know how to ask for support and I didn't want to ask for support when I was struggling is I felt like I had to do it alone. And I think that's also another thing in our society where we are meant to be very individualized when really that community resilience is so important and the support within community is so beautiful and powerful and that we are meant to be codependent species with each other. We aren't meant to be individual. And so there's compassion that we can have for each other too, but a lot of it does start with the compassion within ourselves.
Beautifully said, Ashana.
Thanks.
Um, Beautifully said. I just think that it's so powerful to go, okay, the intention isn't to be void of struggle,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think that, I mean, that's a common misconception for clients when they first sit across from me,
Mm-hmm.
right? They are so sick of feeling a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be anxious, depressed, overwhelmed, burnt out, lost in their career, disassociated from themselves. My God, there's just, that's a smattering of what people come to me
Yeah.
for. But I think the kind of innocent misunderstanding is that, there's some level of understanding or enlightenment or insight that means we no longer have the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I love that I'm hearing from you is it's not like my life is void of struggle, but understanding that, number one, is helpful
Mm-hmm.
because then some acceptance can come into the equation.
Yeah.
And then what I also love that you said is what's underneath that is you can get curious about what am I needing?
Yes. Yeah.
And what a beautiful question
Mm-hmm.
that people don't ask themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It was something that I didn't ask myself ever. I didn't think it was something that I deserved to ask myself. And so it's first bringing that attention as it opens up or the awareness to yourself as it opens up this space of like almost stillness that you can be present with yourself for the first time ever. And so that's what I really felt. And when I first asked myself those questions, I didn't know the answer to them. And it was okay to not know the answer to them, because I was also just beginning to build the relationship within myself. And it's still something that I am still learning about, my needs and my wants, and like how to comfort and support myself. And that's not a bad thing. It's just like this ongoing journey that I get to learn more about myself, because I am changing every day.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God. It's thank you so much for saying that you didn't have an answer for the question of, what do I need?
Yeah.
Oftentimes I will, talk to folks about how there tends to be an answer from our wisdom. It can be just like a quiet nudge. And sometimes it's so ordinary that we miss it. Because if we feel like shit, if we ask ourselves, what do I need? And what occurs to us is a glass of water,
Mm-hmm.
we just don't even hear it, or we overwrite it because we go, that's far too simple for everything that's going on in me right
Yeah.
now. Right. And so it's just exactly like you're saying. It's about starting to kind of just get into relationship with the fact that stuff might be very ordinary and likely will be,
Mm-hmm.
and much more simple, like cancel plans, don't go out tonight,
Mm-hmm.
go on a walk, put the phone down, all
Yeah.
these really ordinary directives.
Yeah.
And though I really appreciate you saying that sometimes you don't even know what that sounds like at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, especially if you've had a world of thought around my needs don't matter because there's something off about me that I even have needs to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I was definitely the type of person that wanted to make sure everyone around me was okay, and that like I didn't matter, because if everyone else was okay, then I was okay. So I didn't feel like I had needs, like, ever. I didn't think that was something. And so it was when I first asked that question, I was like, wow. And it's just bringing awareness to that question that kind of like stirs up something within, is like, yeah, there are needs there that like want to come to surface, and like it's going to take time for them to come to surface and present themselves. And I think like how I was able to also understand how that works is wanting to go into like a healing profession is something that I've always been passionate about ever since I was a kid. And so it was when I learned that to really support and provide for other people, I need to first do that within myself, because my cup needs to be overflowing to fill others' cups. I can't fill someone's cup with an empty cup.
Yes, 100%. Absolutely. And as the more we can help others more when we're coming from a place of certainty. And you can't come from a place of certainty until you have the experience,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I
Yeah.
mean, my God, you're a ball of certainty already. So I'm not saying you've got a long way to go. You're already ready, right? Uh, but something that just clicked too with what you said is there is such an innocent misunderstanding for folks. I know it was massive for me that I really innocently thought that my feelings were telling me something about my circumstances
Mm-hmm.
or about the people I was with. Just I always thought that my feelings were telling me something about what was going on outside of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what kind of makes sense to me when you said, I thought that as long as everybody around me, as long as their needs were met, they felt good, then I would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because again, we think if our feelings are coming from outside of us,
Mm-hmm.
let me make sure my environment, my circumstances are just so.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when I realized finally that my feelings were only ever letting me know what's going on inside of me,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's so empowering, because that's when you can then go, okay, have a conversation with myself around my own needs first. To your point about that's
Mm-hmm.
filling up your cup.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course you are an excellent helper in the world because you're grounded.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Groundedness is so powerful. It's something that I really highly value now in my life, is like having that center to come back to. Mm-hmm.
It's so beautiful. And when you know it's, like I said, unconditional, universal, doesn't go anywhere,
Mhm.
so helpful. I'll say this, and then I'd love to hear your feedback. For me, it's been so helpful because I can then experience my own version of overwhelm, burnout, stress, um, whatever emotion is present. And it doesn't mean I have to blow up my life or blow up the circumstance I'm in or do, because I know I'm in there, that I am okay, and
Mhm.
that I can kind of just start to quietly listen to, like, how do I start to shift this
Yeah.
moment?
Yes.
And sometimes it's just the reminder of you've only got 5 more minutes. And then I'm like, okay, that,
Yeah.
something like that even will occur to me. But does that, what does that look like
Yeah.
in?
Yeah, I feel like it's like for so long I didn't allow myself to express my emotions. And so it was really like understanding that my resistance to my emotions was what was making it so painful and uncomfortable to feel my emotions. And so when I let go of that resistance and accept that that's how I was feeling in the moment, I could ride the wave with my emotions and just like allow them to fully express and kind of like go into that and be present with myself and move through that. And when I was being resistant to it, I was just kind of pushing up against it and fighting with myself for so long.
Yes.
Mhm.
Do you find that you, in riding the waves of your emotions, that you have more of a, and I'm not saying that this is a prescriptive for all of our emotional
Mhm.
experience, but do you find that they come and go with more ease versus when you were resisting them, that they'd kind of stick around longer?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's almost like that saying, what was once pain is now sensation. Is I am now like, I'm with the emotion. I'm not like combating the emotion. And it was actually something that this week kind of illuminated myself for my anger. I asked myself, how do I love my anger? Because anger is not something I let myself feel because I've always viewed it as a bad emotion. And when I asked myself that question, the answers that kind of came out was like, how do I enjoy my anger? Like, I am allowed to enjoy this emotion that I'm feeling. This emotion doesn't need to be a bad thing. I can't control this feeling that's coming up, but I can control how I react to this feeling. And so when I embrace my anger, I can express it in ways that are enjoyable, whether it's like just screaming loud to music or dancing really hard. Like, it doesn't have to come out in these really like violent ways that people view anger. It can be a really beautiful emotion.
I love that.
Yeah.
You made me reflect on my own anger, and honestly, it ends up
Mhm.
kind of putting, for me, it becomes fuel in my tank because I,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot of what fuels the work I want to do and the passions I have. Like, there is a lot that I'm angry that's happening in our world, and I think I deserve to be angry about it, and I deserve to want to make change with it too. So it's fueling a lot of my determinations.
oh God,
Mhm.
hell yeah, Sean. Okay, so before I ask you the final question that I ask everybody on this podcast, can you please? So I know that you're at university, so you're in your studies and doing all of that, but you are also starting to have conversations with younger people, people who have been diagnosed with autism, and then, of course, as I'm sure everybody can very well tell now from listening to you, you are going to be an incredible leader and facilitator for people all different
Thank
backgrounds,
you.
neurotypical, neurodivergent, whatever, because truly everything you're saying is so relatable and important for all humans. But all of that being said, so I know you are starting to just kind of quietly plant seeds around being able to help people. So
Mhm.
where, if anybody is interested in looking more into that, to have a conversation with you or look more into what you're up to, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I am now a spiritual life coach and in that practice. And so I have my website, ashanaross.com, which talks more about who I am, the practice that I'm doing. And in that, I have my contact info. And so you can just always reach out to me. I'm pretty responsive. So, and I just love to be in discussion with people too. It's really great to see how taking this path and journey in my life has really sparked like these kind of discussions, and just being able to like talk to more people about these experiences is really great.
That's awesome. And for everybody listening, it's also going to be, your website will be in the show notes, so people will be able to click on it. So
great. Thank you.
That too. Yes, of course. Okay, Ashana Ross, thank you so much for coming. This has been the most incredible, deep, and just enlightening conversation. My God, thank you so much. I do have one more question for you that I ask every guest, no matter who they are. So whatever occurs to you is exactly what is meant for this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Ashana, what moves you?
Wow, that's a good question. I feel like there's so much that moves me, and a lot of it is like being in relationship with myself and others in my environment, of like feeling connected to this greater sense of collective reality, and that we are all in this experience together, and that we are not separate from each other, and we are not separate from our environment either, that we are all connected, and that we can all experience this as one.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jessie.
Conversation. What a human. Thank you.
Thank you.
So looking forward to seeing you again and being in conversation again. I have a feeling that you'll be in my ether probably for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Thank you.
Another way of saying it is, you can't get rid of me.
Yeah. That's great.
Thank you so much for coming on, Ashana.
Thank you, Jessie. It's been great. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to What Moves You with Jessie. Let's stay connected. You can find more ideas and strategies on being human on my Instagram, @WhatMovesYouWithJessie. Sign up for my newsletter or learn more about working with me at whatmovesYouWithJessie.com. And please rate and review the show. And let us know what you think and what resonated. I read every single review. They mean so much to me. You can also call in on our hotline with your thoughts on what resonated there too. It is always live at 818-646-JESS. That's 818-646-JESS. What Moves You with Jessie is produced by Mike McGraw and Tinker City Music. Now, let's take a deep breath and give ourselves permission to live in this moment for what truly moves you.